My name is Emma Rodriguez, and I'm 26 years old now, but the scars from my childhood still ache every day. When I was 9, my sister Maya's jumping game left me with a broken wrist that my parents dismissed as typical childhood clumsiness. 17 years later, a routine MRI for chronic pain revealed the shocking truth about what really happened during those terrifying afternoons and turned my family's world upside down when the doctor picked up the phone to call the authorities. I never imagined that medical evidence would finally validate what nobody believed back then. From the outside, the Rodriguez family appeared perfect. My father, Carlos, worked as an engineering manager. My mother, Isabella, was a beloved kindergarten teacher at our local school, and we lived in a beautiful 5-bedroom house in an upscale neighborhood with perfectly maintained gardens and friendly neighbors. But behind those walls existed a very different reality. One where family hierarchy was rigid and cruel, and I occupied the very bottom. Maya was 4 years older than me, and from my earliest memories, she was the golden child. She possessed our parents' hearts completely with her infectious laugh, outgoing personality, and remarkable ability to transform into the perfect daughter whenever adults were present. To everyone outside our home, Maya was polite, responsible, and wise beyond her years. Teachers praised her constantly, neighbors frequently commented on what a wonderful girl she was, and my parents glowed with pride at every compliment. I was her opposite. While Maya commanded attention effortlessly, I was shy and introspective. I found joy in painting watercolors, reading novels for hours in quiet corners, and writing short stories in my notebook. My kindergarten teacher once told my mother I was exceptionally creative and emotionally intelligent. Unfortunately, in our family, these qualities weren't valued. They were seen as character flaws. My sensitivity was met with sighs and comments like, "Toughen up," or "Stop being so theatrical." The difference in our treatment became more pronounced as we aged. When Maya brought home excellent grades, she received enthusiastic praise and sometimes special treats. When I achieved the same results, I got a brief "good job" before attention shifted elsewhere. If we both broke rules in identical ways, her consequences would be minimal or completely absent, while I'd face punishment for weeks. Maya is naturally more mature, my mother would explain when I questioned the unfairness. When you're older, you'll understand responsibility like she does. But Maya had perfected the art of manipulation. She knew exactly how to present herself to adults while being completely different when they weren't watching. By age 10, she had developed an almost scientific approach to tormenting me without leaving evidence. One of her preferred methods was to grab the tender skin on the inside of my upper arm and twist it hard enough to bring tears to my eyes, but never hard enough to leave visible marks. She'd choose moments when our parents were nearby, but not directly watching. When I inevitably cried out, she'd immediately adopt a confused, innocent expression. "What's wrong now?" my father would call from the kitchen. "Nothing," Maya would respond quickly. "Emma's just being dramatic again." And that would end it. No investigation, no questions, just automatic assumption that I was overreacting as usual. My childhood friend, Sophia Martinez, was one of the few people who witnessed the reality of Maya's behavior toward me. Sophia lived 3 houses down and often came over to play. During one afternoon when we were about 7, Maya burst into my bedroom, grabbed the puzzle we were working on, and scattered the pieces across the floor before walking away without a word. "Why did she do that?" Sophia asked, staring at the destroyed puzzle in shock. "Because she can," I replied quietly, beginning to collect the pieces. "If we tell my mom, Maya will just say we made a mess, and I'm trying to blame her." When Sophia suggested we tell my mother anyway, I shook my head firmly. They never believed me. It's easier to just clean it up. The pattern continued year after year. When I was 8, Maya accidentally spilled juice on a school project I'd spent days creating. My parents told me it was my responsibility to keep my work somewhere safe. When she borrowed my favorite book and returned it with pages torn out, I was criticized for caring too much about material possessions. Each incident reinforced the established narrative. Maya could do no wrong, and I could do no right. As Maya entered middle school, Her tactics became more sophisticated and dangerous. The psychological manipulation continued, but she began incorporating physical intimidation. She'd stand extremely close to me, raise her hand as if to strike, then laugh when I flinched. She'd accidentally bump into me while carrying something hot, causing minor burns that she'd apologize for so convincingly that even I sometimes questioned whether they were intentional. "Sorry, Emma. It was just an accident," became her signature phrase, one that my parents accepted without hesitation. By the time Maya was 13 and I was 9, our family dynamic was completely established. She was the perfect daughter who occasionally had to deal with her overly sensitive, attention-seeking little sister. I was the family problem, the one who needed to learn resilience, emotional strength, and maturity like my sister. What none of them realized was that Maya's behavior was about to escalate from cruel to genuinely dangerous, and the consequences would echo through our lives for nearly 2 decades. It began on a cloudy Saturday morning in March. Maya was bored, and a bored Maya always meant trouble for me. I was sitting at my desk, working on a watercolor painting of our garden, when she appeared in my doorway with that familiar gleam in her eyes that I'd learned to dread. "Let's play a game," she announced, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "I'm busy painting," I mumbled, not looking up from my artwork. I'd learned that direct refusal would only escalate things, but sometimes I could redirect her attention elsewhere. "Not today." She walked over and plucked my paintbrush from my hand, holding it high above my head. "It's called the jumping game, and it's really exciting." "Give that back," I said, standing on my chair to try reaching my brush. "I will after we play. Unless you want me to show Mom and Dad what you wrote about them in your diary." My heart stopped. I hadn't realized she'd found my private journal hidden behind my bookshelf. Inside were my honest feelings about the unfair treatment, how much it hurt when they dismissed my emotions, how lonely I felt in my own family. If they read those words, I was certain they'd never forgive me. "What do I have to do?" I asked quietly, defeated before understanding what she wanted. The jumping game was exactly what it sounded like. Maya would position me somewhere high, and I would jump. The first time, she had me stand on my bed and jump onto the floor. It jarred my knees, but wasn't terrible. She seemed disappointed by my lack of reaction. The following week, she raised the stakes. Our parents had gone to the grocery store for 2 hours, leaving us alone. Maya led me to our staircase. "Stand on the 5th step," she instructed. "No way," I protested. "That's too dangerous." She pulled my diary from behind her back. "I wonder what Mom would think about the page where you wrote that her cooking tastes terrible." Reluctantly, I stood on the 5th step. Maya positioned herself below me. "Now close your eyes and jump forward," she said. "I'll catch you." "You promise?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Cross my heart," she replied with a smile. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and jumped. Maya stepped aside at the last second, and I crashed onto the hardwood floor. The impact knocked the wind out of me and left me with a massive bruise on my hip for weeks. When my parents returned, I told them I'd fallen while running in the house. It was simpler than attempting to explain the truth. The game continued for months, with Maya devising increasingly frightening scenarios. She'd push me off the back deck, trip me in the yard, or shove me into our pool when nobody was looking. The threats evolved too. If I refused to participate, she'd destroy my belongings, tell lies about me to our parents, or threaten to reveal my diary entries. I tried approaching my mother once, speaking carefully while she prepared dinner. "Mom, Maya keeps pushing me and making me jump on purpose." Without looking up from the vegetables she was chopping, my mother sighed. "Emma, don't exaggerate. I'm sure she's just playing around. But she calls it the jumping game, and she threatens me if I don't." "Enough," she interrupted, her knife pausing momentarily. "Your sister would never do something like that. You need to stop creating stories for attention." The dismissal hurt worse than any of my injuries. I realized then that regardless of what Maya did, my parents would never believe me over her. As the game progressed, Maya occasionally invited her friends, Rachel Kim and Ashley Turner, to observe. They never participated directly, but they never intervened either. They'd giggle uncomfortably when Maya would demonstrate her control over me, probably grateful they weren't her targets. "Your sister is really mean," Rachel whispered to me once when Maya stepped away. "Why don't you tell your parents?" Ashley added. "They don't believe me," I replied simply. They exchanged uncomfortable glances, but said nothing more. The worst incident before my broken wrist occurred when Maya instructed me to climb our backyard fence. It was approximately 6 feet high, constructed of wooden posts with a narrow, flat top. She told me to walk across it like a balance beam. "If you make it all the way across without falling, I'll stop the games for an entire month," she promised. Desperate for relief, I attempted it. I made it halfway before Maya suddenly shouted and startled me. I lost my balance and fell, barely missing a large decorative rock with my head. Instead, I landed hard on my shoulder in the flower bed, destroying my mother's prized roses. The punishment for the flowers was no computer privileges for 3 weeks. The pain in my shoulder lasted just as long, but I didn't mention that part to anyone. After each incident, I developed new fears. I began having headaches before school, anxious about what Maya might plan for after classes. I had difficulty sleeping, startling at every sound in our old house. I became constantly alert, always monitoring where Maya was and what mood she appeared to be in. But nothing prepared me for what happened next. 2 days after my 9th birthday, Maya found me reading in the backyard and announced she had planned something special. "This one is going to be amazing," she said with a smile that made my stomach clench with dread. "Meet me behind the garage after lunch. And remember what happens if you don't show up." That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with terrible possibilities. I had no idea that the next day would alter my life permanently. The morning was deceptively beautiful. It was a Saturday in late May, with bright blue skies and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of jasmine through our open windows. I stared out my bedroom window, desperately wishing I could disappear. My stomach was twisted in knots, my breakfast untouched, as the clock moved closer to lunch. At noon precisely, my father called upstairs. "Girls, lunch is ready." We gathered around the kitchen table, my father reading his tablet, my mother placing grilled cheese sandwiches in front of us, and Maya sitting across from me, with that knowing smile only I could interpret. She kicked my shin under the table and mouthed, "1 hour," when our parents weren't looking. I forced myself to eat half my sandwich, though each bite felt like swallowing cardboard. When lunch ended, my father went to his home office to work on weekend projects, and my mother settled in the living room with her book club selection. Maya gave me a pointed look before heading upstairs to her room. At 1 o'clock, I made my way to the backyard, my steps heavy with dread. Our property extended to a small wooded area, and the garage sat near the back fence, partially hidden by a large maple tree. When I rounded the corner, I found Maya waiting with a length of rope in her hands. "You're late," she said, though I wasn't. "What's the rope for?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Today, we're playing the ultimate jumping game," she announced proudly. "You're going to climb up there." She pointed to the roof of the garage. It wasn't extremely high, maybe 10 feet off the ground, but to my 9-year-old perspective, it might as well have been a mountain. "No way," I said, backing away. "That's way too dangerous. I could really get hurt." "Don't be such a baby," she scoffed. "I've climbed up there plenty of times. Besides," she pulled my diary from her pocket, a different one than before, my newest secret journal I thought I'd hidden well inside my closet. "I found some really interesting stuff in here about how much you hate living in this family." Tears filled my eyes. "Please, Maya, don't make me do this." "It's easy," she insisted, ignoring my plea. "I'll help you get up there, and all you have to do is stand at the edge and jump down. There's soft grass below. It'll be fine." When I still hesitated, her expression darkened. "Fine. I guess I'll go show Mom what you wrote about her being a bad teacher." "What was it?" "Sometimes I pretend Mom's lessons sound interesting, but really they're boring, and I feel sorry for her students." It was such a small thing, but in our family, criticizing my mother's teaching was unforgivable. With a sinking heart, I walked toward the garage. Maya had already positioned an old aluminum ladder against the side. It looked unstable and worn, with one rung visibly bent. "You go first," I said, making one last desperate attempt to ensure my safety. "Nice try. You're going up, or everyone sees your diary. Now." With trembling hands, I began to climb. The ladder swayed slightly under my weight, and I gasped, gripping the sides more tightly. "Hurry up," Maya called from below. Step by step, I made my way upward. When I reached the top, the challenge of transitioning from the ladder to the sloped garage roof became apparent. I hesitated, looking down at Maya. "I can't do it," I said. "It's too difficult to get onto the roof. Just swing your leg over and pull yourself up," she instructed impatiently. "Do it now, or I'm going inside with this." She waved my diary. I took a shaky breath and attempted to follow her instructions, swinging my right leg over to touch the roof. As I shifted my weight, the ladder wobbled dangerously. I froze in terror. "Stop being so dramatic," Maya snapped. "Look, I'll hold the ladder steady." She grabbed the sides, and I cautiously continued. Finally, I managed to scramble onto the roof, my heart pounding so violently I could feel it in my throat. The garage roof was covered in rough asphalt shingles that scratched my palms and knees as I crawled toward the center. "Stand up," Maya commanded from below. "I can't. It's too steep," I called back, genuine panic in my voice. "Stand up, or I'm getting the diary right now." Slowly, carefully, I pushed myself to my feet, my arms stretched out for balance. The roof felt unstable beneath me, small pieces of old shingle crumbling under my sneakers. "Now walk to the edge and jump," Maya called, excitement clear in her voice. I inched forward, each step feeling like an eternity. When I reached the edge, I looked down. The ground seemed impossibly far away, though it was only about 10 feet. Maya stood back now, watching expectantly. "I'm scared," I admitted, tears streaming down my face. "Just jump already," she shouted, losing patience. "Or are you too much of a baby?" "I want to come down," I sobbed. "Please let me use the ladder." "Jump, or I'm going inside right now," she threatened, taking a step toward the house. I looked down again, trying to convince myself it wasn't that far. Maybe if I sat down first and then lowered myself carefully. I began to crouch, but as I did, my foot slipped on loose shingles. I felt myself falling, but not in any controlled way I'd planned. My body twisted in the air, my arms flailing wildly as I tried to regain balance. The impact came with a sickening crack that I felt more than heard. I landed awkwardly on my left side, my wrist absorbing most of the impact. Pain unlike anything I'd ever experienced shot through me, white-hot and overwhelming. I screamed, a primal sound that tore from my throat without conscious thought. Maya was beside me instantly, her expression mixing shock and fear. "Shut up," she hissed. "You're fine. Stop screaming." But I couldn't stop. The pain was all-consuming, drowning out everything else. I looked at my wrist and nearly fainted. It was bent at an unnatural angle, and I could see bone pressing against the skin. Maya's fear quickly transformed into self-preservation mode. "I'm getting Mom and Dad," she said, running toward the house. "Don't tell them I made you climb up there." Minutes later, my parents rushed into the backyard. My mother reached me first, her eyes widening at the sight of my wrist. "What happened?" she demanded, looking between Maya and me. Before I could speak, Maya jumped in smoothly. We were playing outside, and Emma decided to climb onto the garage roof, even though I told her not to. She was trying to show off, and she fell. "Is that true?" my father asked, his tone already suggesting he believed Maya's version. Through my tears and overwhelming pain, I tried to tell the truth. "No, she made me climb up there." She's lying," Maya interrupted confidently. "Why would I make her climb on the roof? That doesn't even make sense." My parents exchanged that familiar look I'd seen countless times before, the one that said they'd already decided who to believe. "Honestly, Emma," my mother sighed as my father carefully helped me to my feet. "What were you thinking?" "But I didn't," I began. My father actually chuckled, cutting me off. "Always the dramatic one, aren't you? Come on, let's get some ice on that wrist." They laughed. My wrist was obviously broken, I was in excruciating pain, and they laughed it off as another example of my attention-seeking behavior. Only when the swelling became impossible to ignore did they finally decide a hospital visit might be necessary. "It's probably just a sprain," my mother said as we drove to the emergency room. "But we should get it checked to be safe." The emergency room doctor, Dr. Patricia Chun, took one look at my wrist and ordered x-rays immediately. When the results came back, her expression became serious. "It's a complete fracture of the distal radius," she explained to my parents. "She'll need a cast for at least 8 weeks." As she prepared to set the bone, Dr. Chun asked how the injury occurred. My father explained that I had fallen while playing. "I was climbing on our garage roof, and I fell," I added quietly, not mentioning Maya's role with my parents standing right there. Dr. Chun nodded, but I noticed her making additional notes in my chart. She asked several more questions about how I'd landed and the height of the garage. Then she turned to my parents. "Children her age don't typically attempt climbs like this without some kind of encouragement," she remarked. "Was she supervised?" "Our older daughter was with her," my mother replied defensively. "Emma tends to be impulsive and, well, she seeks attention sometimes." The doctor's expression remained neutral as she finished setting my wrist and applying the cast. Before we left, she gave me a gentle smile and said, "Take care of yourself, Emma. No more climbing, okay?" I nodded silently, knowing it wouldn't matter what I said. The story had already been established. Emma was being dramatic again. Emma was seeking attention. Emma did something foolish and got hurt. As we drove home, Maya sat beside me in the back seat, smirking when our parents weren't looking. She had won again, and we both knew it. My wrist throbbed beneath the heavy cast, but the pain of being disbelieved and blamed hurt far worse. That night, alone in my room, I stared at the bulky white cast and made a silent promise to myself. Someday, someone would believe me. Someday, the truth would come out. I had no idea it would take 17 years and medical evidence to make that happen. The 8 weeks I spent in that cast were just the beginning of a long struggle. When the doctor removed it, my wrist looked pale and thin, but more concerning was the persistent pain that never fully disappeared. The official diagnosis was normal post-fracture discomfort that would resolve with time. It didn't. I returned to school with instructions to avoid physical activities, but whispers had already spread. "Emma broke her wrist trying to fly off her garage," one classmate said. "I heard she did it for attention," added another. Maya, naturally, did nothing to correct these rumors. If anything, she enhanced them with carefully placed comments and exaggerated eye rolls whenever the subject arose. The incident became a visible symbol of how my family viewed me: fragile, dramatic, prone to poor decisions. Whenever I complained about anything afterward, someone would inevitably reference the garage incident as evidence of my tendency toward exaggeration. "Remember when you thought climbing on the garage was a good idea?" my father would say whenever I suggested anything even mildly adventurous. Let's not repeat that mistake. The physical pain in my wrist continued, becoming a constant dull ache that flared up in cold weather or when I used it too much. I learned to adapt, to favor my right arm, to hide winces when the pain spiked unexpectedly. Complaining only reinforced their perception of me as overly sensitive, so I stopped mentioning it. By the time I was 11, I'd convinced myself that maybe this was just how wrists were supposed to feel after being broken. The psychological impact was far worse than the physical pain. My relationship with my family deteriorated further after the garage incident. I withdrew into myself, spending more time alone in my room with books and art supplies. I developed an intense fear of heights that persisted for years. Worst of all, I stopped trusting my own perceptions and feelings. When everyone around you consistently dismisses your experiences, you begin to question yourself. I did try to tell other adults what had really happened. A few months after the incident, I gathered courage and approached Mrs. Linda Foster, my 4th grade teacher. "My sister made me climb on our garage, and that's how I broke my wrist," I confessed after class, my heart pounding. "She makes me do dangerous things and threatens me if I don't." Mrs. Foster's face showed concern, but also uncertainty. "That sounds very serious, Emma. "Have you told your parents about this?" "They don't believe me," I said, tears welling in my eyes. "They think I'm making it up." She promised to speak with the school counselor, and the next week I was called to Ms. Patricia Wong's office. She was a kind woman with a gentle voice, but it quickly became apparent that she'd already formed an opinion. "Your teacher mentioned you've been sharing some concerning stories," she began. "I've spoken with your parents, and they're worried about your tendency to create dramatic narratives." My heart sank. They had contacted my parents before even speaking with me properly. "I'm not lying," I insisted. "Maya really did make me climb on the garage." "Your parents mentioned you've had difficulty adjusting since your sister entered high school," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Sometimes when older siblings gain more independence, younger siblings feel left out and try to get attention in unhealthy ways." I left her office with a pamphlet about healthy sibling relationships and the crushing realization that no adult was going to help me. The system was designed to believe parents over children, and my parents believed Maya over me. I was trapped. As Maya progressed through her teenage years, her methods of control became more sophisticated. The jumping game ended after the broken wrist. Perhaps even she realized she'd gone too far. But she found subtler ways to torment me. She'd borrow my belongings without asking and return them damaged. She'd make cutting comments about my appearance when no one else could hear. She'd sabotage my friendships with casual lies told to my classmates. One unexpected source of support came in my sophomore year of high school when I met Mr. David Kim, my art teacher. He noticed my talent for painting and encouraged me to express myself through creativity. More importantly, he seemed to see beyond my quiet exterior to the pain beneath. "Your paintings have a lot of shadows in them, Emma," he observed one day after class. "There's beauty there, but also sadness." For a moment, I considered telling him everything about Maya, about the garage, about years of not being believed. But the memory of previous attempts stopped me. Instead, I simply nodded. "Art is a safe place to put the things we can't say out loud," he told me. "Whatever those shadows are, you can express them on canvas. It might not fix them, but it might make them easier to carry." His understanding became a lifeline. I poured my experiences into my artwork, creating pieces that expressed what I couldn't say in words. When I graduated high school, Mr. Kim wrote me a letter that I still treasure. "Your strength inspires me. Whatever challenges you've faced have given you a depth of insight most people twice your age don't possess. Don't let the shadows define you. Let them deepen your light." College was my escape. I chose a school 4 states away, despite my parents' pressure to attend the local university where Maya was studying marketing. For the first time, I could breathe without constantly looking over my shoulder. I made friends who had no preconceived notions about me being dramatic or attention-seeking. I studied social work, driven by a desire to help others who felt voiceless like I had. But the physical pain in my wrist never disappeared. If anything, it worsened over time. By my mid-20s, I had developed chronic pain that radiated from my wrist up to my elbow. It affected my ability to write for long periods, to carry heavy objects, even to perform simple tasks like opening jars. I tried over-the-counter pain relievers, heating pads, ice packs, wrist braces. Nothing provided more than temporary relief. My relationship with my family remained strained. I visited for major holidays but kept the trips short and superficial. Maya had matured somewhat, or at least become better at hiding her manipulative tendencies. She graduated with honors, landed a prestigious position at an advertising agency, and became engaged to Michael, a man who seemed genuinely kind but had no idea who his fiancé really was. My parents continued to view me through the same lens they always had. Any achievement of mine was met with mild surprise, as if they hadn't expected me to succeed. Any problem I encountered was subtly attributed to my own poor choices or overreactions. "Have you tried yoga for that wrist pain?" my mother suggested during one holiday visit. I read an article that said most chronic pain is psychological. The implication was clear. The pain was all in my head, just another example of my dramatic nature. I stopped mentioning it to them entirely. By the time I turned 26, the pain had become truly debilitating. I had a fulfilling job as a social worker at a community center, working with teenagers who reminded me too much of my younger self. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could recognize signs of abuse in these kids and advocate fiercely for them, yet I had never been able to get justice for myself. After a particularly severe flare-up that left me unable to work for several days, my friend Sophia, who had remained close despite the distance, insisted I see a specialist. "This isn't normal, Emma," she said firmly. "Broken bones don't cause pain for 17 years unless something wasn't treated properly. Promise me you'll make an appointment." Reluctantly, I agreed. I had no idea that this appointment would change everything, finally bringing to light the truth that had been buried for nearly 2 decades. The waiting room at Dr. Jennifer Walsh's orthopedic clinic was decorated in calming earth tones with nature photography on the walls. I sat with my intake forms on a clipboard, pen hovering over the section labeled "Reason for Visit." How could I explain 17 years of pain in a few lines? I finally wrote, "Chronic pain in left wrist following childhood fracture, progressively worsening." Dr. Walsh was in her early 50s with silver-streaked hair and a direct but compassionate manner. "So, Ms. Rodriguez," she began after reviewing my forms, "you broke your wrist when you were 9, and you've had pain ever since?" "Yes," I replied. "It's never really healed properly. At least, that's what it feels like." She asked me to describe the pain in detail, its location, intensity, what made it better or worse. Then she examined my wrist, gently manipulating it in different directions and noting when I winced. "Your medical records indicate this was treated as a simple distal radius fracture," she said, looking at her computer screen. "But your symptoms suggest there might have been additional complexity to the injury. I'd like to order an MRI to see what's actually happening inside your wrist." Getting insurance approval for the MRI took 2 weeks of persistent phone calls and paperwork. When the day finally arrived, I was more nervous than I'd expected. The MRI machine was intimidating, a large white cylinder with a narrow opening. "Have you had an MRI before?" asked the technician, a friendly woman named Maria. I shook my head. "It's loud but completely painless," she assured me. "You'll need to lie very still for about 30 minutes. We'll give you earplugs and a call button in case you need anything." As I lay inside the machine, trying to ignore the claustrophobic feeling and the rhythmic banging sounds, I thought about all the years I'd lived with this pain. All the times I'd been told it was in my head, that I was exaggerating, that I should just be tougher. Whatever the MRI showed, at least it would be objective evidence, something no one could dismiss as dramatic or attention-seeking. A week later, I returned to Dr. Walsh's office for the results. The moment she walked in, I knew something was significant. Her previously relaxed demeanor had been replaced by professional seriousness that made my stomach tighten. "Emma," she said, sitting down and looking directly at me, "the MRI shows something concerning that I need to discuss with you." She turned her computer screen so I could see the images, though they meant nothing to my untrained eye, just grayscale shapes and shadows. "Your wrist shows evidence of multiple fractures, not just the one that was treated when you were 9, she explained, pointing to various spots on the screen. "There's a healed fracture here in the ulna that appears never to have received proper medical treatment. And here," she pointed to another area, "there's evidence of a stress fracture in the radius that's consistent with repeated impact injuries." I stared at the screen, trying to process what she was telling me. "But I only broke my wrist once," I said slowly, "when I fell off the garage." Dr. Walsh's expression was gentle but firm. "These injuries show a pattern we call repetitive trauma," she said carefully. "In children, we typically see these patterns in cases of physical abuse. The injury pattern in your wrist is not consistent with a single fall." The word abuse hit me like a physical blow. But I wasn't abused, I protested automatically. "I mean, my sister was cruel to me, but—" "Emma," Dr. Walsh interrupted softly, "I need to ask you a difficult question, and I need you to be honest with me. Was someone intentionally hurting you when you were a child?" The directness of her question broke something loose inside me, a dam I hadn't even realized I'd built. 17 years of dismissed pain, of not being believed, of questioning my own experiences came flooding out all at once. "My sister," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. She called it the jumping game. She'd make me climb high places and then jump or fall. The garage was just the worst time, the time someone else finally noticed because it was too obvious to hide. Dr. Walsh handed me tissues and waited patiently while I composed myself. She'd threaten me if I didn't do what she wanted. She'd push me off things, trip me, make me fall in ways that looked accidental. No one ever believed me when I tried to tell them. I told her everything about Maya's manipulation, my parents' dismissal, the years of being labeled dramatic and attention-seeking. As I spoke, Dr. Walsh took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions but mostly just listening. When I finally fell silent, emotionally drained, she said, "Thank you for telling me this. It took tremendous courage." "Does it matter now?" I asked, wiping my eyes. "It was so long ago." "It matters for several reasons," she replied. "First, for your treatment. Understanding the true nature of your injuries helps me provide better care. Second, for your healing, both physical and emotional. And third," she hesitated slightly, "because I'm legally required to report suspected child abuse, even historical cases." "Report?" I echoed, feeling cold. "To who?" "To the authorities," she explained gently. "What your sister did was criminal child abuse, and your parents' failure to protect you despite clear signs constitutes neglect." The room seemed to spin around me. All these years, I'd thought of what happened as Maya being cruel, as my parents being dismissive. I had never applied the words abuse or neglect to my experiences. Dr. Walsh called in James, their social worker, who explained everything clearly. The report would go to both Child Protective Services and the police. Even though I was now an adult, the report was about childhood abuse. There would likely be an investigation. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Rodriguez," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "I know this isn't easy." It had been 2 weeks since Dr. Walsh made her report. I'd spent those weeks in emotional turmoil, but ultimately decided to cooperate fully with the investigation. "We'll go at your pace," Detective Morrison assured me, setting up a recorder. "You can ask me to pause anytime." For the next 2 hours, I recounted every incident I could remember. Detective Morrison took detailed notes, showing particular interest in Maya's friends who had witnessed some events and my childhood friend Sophia, who had seen Maya's behavior firsthand. "Do you remember the names of the doctor who treated you originally?" she asked. "Dr. Chun," I replied. "Patricia Chun, I think." "We'll locate those medical records," she assured me. "Dr. Walsh has already provided her findings, but the original treatment records will be important evidence." The word evidence sent chills through me. This wasn't just a conversation. It was the foundation for potential criminal charges against my own sister. Over the following weeks, the investigation progressed rapidly. Detective Morrison interviewed my parents, who initially denied everything. According to Sophia, who still lived in her hometown, my parents were telling everyone I was making false accusations for attention, the same dismissive narrative they'd always used. Maya refused to speak with investigators without an attorney. When she finally gave a statement, she categorically denied forcing me to climb the garage or creating any dangerous games. "My sister was always accident-prone and attention-seeking," she reportedly told detectives. "I tried to protect her, but she constantly put herself in dangerous situations." The case might have become, as she said, situation if not for 3 crucial developments. First, Dr. Walsh's medical evidence was unequivocal. The multiple healed fractures in my wrist told a story that couldn't be explained by a single fall. 2 additional specialists reviewed the MRI and concurred with her assessment. Second, Detective Morrison located Dr. Chun, who still remembered treating me. More importantly, she had made notes in my file about her suspicions. Patient shows signs of fear when discussing accident. Story seems coached. Parents dismissive of injury severity. Recommend follow-up for possible non-accidental trauma. She had apparently filed a report with Child Services at the time, but without more evidence, no action was taken. Third, and most surprisingly, my childhood friend Sophia had kept a diary during our elementary school years documenting multiple incidents she'd witnessed, including specific dates and descriptions of Maya's behavior toward me. I was worried about Emma, but didn't know how to help. Sophia told detectives. I started writing everything down, thinking maybe someday it would matter. Those contemporaneous accounts, written by a child with no motive to fabricate, proved compelling evidence. 6 weeks into the investigation, Detective Morrison called with news. The district attorney has decided to pursue charges against your sister for child abuse resulting in serious bodily injury. The news hit me harder than expected. Part of me had never believed this would progress beyond the investigation stage. What happens next? I asked. She'll be formally charged and arraigned. After that, there will either be a plea agreement or a trial. The story leaked to local media, resulting in headlines like, "Woman faces felony charges for childhood game that injured sister." My phone filled with messages from relatives and former classmates, some supportive, others accusatory. My parents finally called 3 days after Maya's arrest. I let it go to voicemail. My mother's message was tearful and confused. "Emma, please call us back. We don't understand what's happening. Why are you doing this to our family?" Their persistent belief that I was causing harm rather than seeking justice confirmed I'd made the right choice in maintaining distance. 3 months after my MRI revelation, Maya's attorney contacted the district attorney about a plea agreement. She would plead guilty to a reduced charge of reckless endangerment of a child, accept 3 years of probation, undergo mandatory counseling, and be placed on a registry preventing her from working with children. After discussing it with my therapist, I agreed to the plea arrangement. What I wanted most wasn't punishment, but acknowledgement, official recognition that what happened to me was real, wrong, and not my fault. The day Maya stood before a judge and admitted guilt was the day I finally began to feel truly free. As she made her statement, I recognized that my actions as a child caused harm. I never intended the consequences to be so severe. I felt a profound sense of closure. It wasn't the full apology I might have hoped for, but it was more than I'd ever expected to receive. 2 weeks after the sentencing, I received a letter from my mother. Unlike her previous communications filled with denial, this one showed the first signs of recognition. I don't know how to begin. The evidence forced her father and me to confront things we should have seen years ago. "We failed you, Emma. We chose the easier explanation rather than looking deeper when you tried to tell us something was wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just letting you know that we finally believe you." It wasn't everything, but it was something, a crack in the wall of denial that had surrounded my family for decades. The physical healing progressed alongside the emotional. Through specialized physical therapy, the chronic pain that had been my constant companion for 17 years began to diminish significantly. My therapist helped me work through the layers of trauma, using EMDR therapy to process the most painful memories. "Your body kept the score all these years," she explained. "Now that the truth is acknowledged, your nervous system can finally begin to heal." 1 year after my MRI revelation, I was invited to speak at a conference for healthcare professionals about recognizing signs of sibling abuse. Sibling abuse is often dismissed as normal rivalry, I told the audience. But there's a clear line between typical sibling conflict and systematic abuse. Learning to recognize that line could save a child from years of trauma. Standing at that podium, sharing my experience with professionals who could make a difference in children's lives, I felt a sense of purpose emerging from the pain. Today, 2 years after that life-changing MRI, I work as an advocate for child abuse prevention. The chronic pain in my wrist, while not completely gone, has diminished to manageable levels. More importantly, the psychological burden I'd carried for most of my life has finally been lifted. I've learned that truth, even delayed by 17 years, still has power. I've learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting or excusing, but integrating the past into a stronger present. Most importantly, I've learned that my voice matters, not just for myself, but for others who might still be silent, waiting for permission to speak their own truths. If my story resonates with your own experience, please know you're not alone. Healing is possible at any age, and there are people ready to listen when you're ready to speak. Your story matters too. The MRI revealed more than just physical damage to my wrist. It exposed a truth that had been hiding in plain sight for 17 years. And sometimes, that's all it takes. One person willing to look deeper, to ask the right questions, and to believe that our bodies remember what our voices couldn't say.